Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's presentation as part of the Industry Insight webinar series. The topic this time is the Legal Trends Report, What's New in 2018. Speaking today will be Joshua Lenon. Joshua is an attorney admitted to the New York Bar. He studied law at St. Louis University School of Law, obtaining a Juris Doctorate and a certificate in international and comparative law. During this time, Joshua clerked for the Missouri Attorney General, helping prosecute discrimination claims on behalf of Missouri citizens. He also studied European Union law at the University of Georgia School of Law's Brussels Legal Seminar. When working for Thomson Reuters' publishing departments in both the United States and Canada, he helped legal practitioners improve their services. Joshua currently serves as lawyer in residence for Clio, providing legal scholarship and research skills to the leading cloud-based practice management platform headquartered in Vancouver, Canada. He's been a guest lecturer for movements like legal hacking and legal technology at schools like MIT, Suffolk Law, and Vanderbilt. He's also spoken before organizations like Reinvent Law and the ABA Law Practice Futures Initiative. Presentation today will be followed by a Q&A. Please enter your questions into the question box in the webinar panel on the right side of your screen. All questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. We are recording this webinar and will be sending a video and a follow-up email in a few days. We'll also post a video on our blog over at www.lawtechnologytoday.org. Thank you all for joining us. We'll now begin the webinar.
Thank you very much, Austin. Hi, as you said, welcome to the Legal Trends Report, What's New in 2018. I'm Joshua Lenon. I'm the lawyer in residence at Clio. Here's my contact information, including my Twitter account. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to go fast because I have a lot to cover today. I want to bring up this year's updates to firm-focused data, including Clio's own billable hour index and our own key performance indicators for law firms. And then I want to move on to some really unique and new research that Clio has done on behalf of the legal industry on the client experience. Helping us define who is a legal consumer, how likely are they to hire or recommend an attorney, and some interesting observations on how lawyers are failing to meet client expectations, but some key lessons on how you can quickly and easily adjust to them. For those of you who haven't read it yet, this is the third edition of Clio's Legal Trends Report. It's available for free to anybody who would like to download a copy at clio.com/LTR. And in fact, you can download not just one, but all three copies of the Legal Trends Report, with each one focusing on a slightly different aspect of the legal industry. So with our past ones, we talked about working with a law firm, taking a look at law firm operations and efficiencies. And what we're looking at in 2018 is consumer awareness and consideration of legal services and client satisfaction and referrals for helping you earn further business. We're really trying to define what makes a successful law firm. And so part of that, which is interesting, is that we really pulled together three different sources of data to make this happen. The first is Clio data. We had close to 70,000 legal professionals contributing aggregated and anonymized data on their different practices. Now we can't see client files, but we can see metadata around the usage of Clio. So for example, a bill that is created has a date attached to it, and when it is closed, it has a date attached to it. And from that, we can look at that metadata and calculate how long does the average bill stay open. And then when we look at that in bulk, we're able to say across how the whole industry, how long does the average bill stay open? And it's that type of analysis that forms the backbone of Clio's Legal Trends Report. But we've continued to flesh out our understanding of the data within Clio by hosting law firm surveys. This year, we interviewed nearly 2,000 legal professionals, including both Clio users and non-Clio using law firms, to get a sense of the story behind some of the data we were seeing. And we also reached out to 1,300 consumers of legal services to see what is really impacting their choices as they seek out and hire a lawyer. So at the very beginning, let's focus on firm metrics. These are things that we're able to track within Clio, and we highlight every year. So what's interesting is lawyers are struggling to really set and measure goals. 25% express high satisfaction with targets of reaching firm goals. That means 75 do not. And 43% of law firms agree that getting more data insights and setting up better reporting is an important priority in terms of setting up and measuring their goals. But when we ask them how they measure success, we see that they measure success by increasing firm revenue and increasing the operation. But in terms of getting more revenue and increasing efficiency, the activities they need to take are all the way down at the bottom of the metrics. And so while firms set these goals in mind, they don't necessarily set the steps by which to obtain these goals. And that's understandable because lawyers are maxed out. When we talked about when we asked why lawyers work outside of the office, for lawyers and non-lawyers, the primary reason was to catch up on work that didn't get done during the business day. It's going to be very difficult for you to tack more time onto your day because you're probably already operating at peak capacity for the workflow and the processes that you already have. So it's time to start benchmarking data to help you set and manage goals. And we do that with the billable hour index. So when we take a look at the billable hour, one of the things that we're able to see in Clio is the range of rates by which attorneys charge clients. But we don't always know why you're setting those rates the way that you do. So we asked, and what is influencing your hourly rates? The primary thing that lawyers tell us is that pressure from clients is impacting how high they set their rates. And that at the very bottom, my own personal cost of living and the costs associated with running my law firm are the least considered factors. And from a business perspective, that's kind of the opposite of how you should be approaching this. So if you have an overhead of $100,000 necessary to maintain and run your law firm, you need to be at least making that $100,000, but also hopefully creating a profit for yourself and working backwards from those targets in terms of setting your fees. And so if you're negotiating your fees based on client pressure rather than business metrics, you may be setting yourself up for future struggle. Fortunately, it looks like lawyers are somewhat adjusting their fees based on our tracking since 2010. Here we can see that law firms, the purple line, have been steadily growing their fees to $245 per hour, with lawyers charging on average $267, and non-lawyers, interestingly, remaining steady at around $143. This means that lawyers are actually able to negotiate their higher value, but that we're probably seeing technology's pressure against the repetitive tasks that may be assigned to non-lawyers and keeping them from really being able to leverage the growing economy to drive their salary up. Now, this green line here is the Consumer Price Index, and this is a national number that's related to inflation. And what we're happy to see is, while law firms themselves may be a little behind the curve when it comes to percentage growth in the Consumer Price Index, that individual lawyers are seemingly doing better for themselves and coming out ahead in the economy. And with that same data, we're able to break it down a little bit further by looking at not just actual rates for geographic areas in North America, but an adjusted rate where you might be able to stretch your money a little bit further. And as always, we see Nevada as one of the better places to practice law. Not only does it have a higher billable hour rate on average, but lawyers there are able to stretch that billable rate from $313 to $320 in terms of actual purchasing power. That means that lower cost of living there lets your money go further. Whereas it's somewhat the opposite in larger states, where we see that a high billable hour in California actually goes less far when compared to the state right next to it. So billable rates are interesting and have a lot of impact to them. And we're even able to see now down to certain metropolitan areas because we've gotten so many lawyers in those areas contributing their data to Clio that you are now able to kind of see and benchmark, is your billable rate consistent with lawyers within your area? Should you be charging more if you're a premium service in comparison to them? Should you be charging less if you're operating at maybe a volume business rather than a qualitative measurement? The billable index provides lots of data, and Clio maintains this as a rate calculator on our website at clio.com/LTR, where you can enter your own individual practice area and your own rate and see how you compare against lawyers within your region. But what's interesting is, even though we know what you guys are charging on a billable hour, you're actually having trouble maintaining your businesses with that. And that's because of these three key performance indicators: utilization rate, realization rate, collection rate. So utilization rate is really simple. It's the number of billable hours worked divided by the number of hours in a day. And from survey information, we're able to see that the average lawyer works about 8 hours a day. Now, some lawyers work more, some lawyers work less, but it's about 8 hours is the average. And what we're finding is lawyers aren't actually billing 8 hours a day, but a much lower percentage. Only 30% of their working day is being spent doing billable activities. From that 30%, we then move to the realization rate. And the realization rate is the number of billable hours invoiced divided by the number of billable hours worked. So maybe you're recording 4 hours, but only billing 3 for whatever reason. And from there, we see of this 30% of your day that you're actually billing, you're only invoicing about 80% of that. And finally, there's the collection rate, the number of hours collected upon divided by the number of billable hours invoiced. So as we see, we have 80% of 30%, and of that amount, we're only collecting about 85%. So for every $100 you actually send in a bill to your client, you're only getting paid about 85. Now, this varies from practice area. The full legal trends report will actually do a full breakdown of that. But it's interesting to see how this really eats up the workday for lawyers. So if we take a look at the average 8-hour workday, the average law firm is only billing about 2.4 hours, only about invoicing 1.9 of those hours, and only collecting about 1.6 of these hours. Now, this shouldn't be incredibly surprising that there is some division between billable and non-billable time for a law firm. For most solo and small law firms, you're wearing multiple hats. You have to carry a lot of the work forward. But we were surprised to see how little is actually being collected by most firms out there. And when you adjust for the various practice areas, and again, Clio tracked about 30 practice areas in this report, you can see it can make some really dramatic differences. So in bankruptcy law, when billed on an hourly basis, we see that the average rate is $335. But once we start factoring in realization and collection, the average law firm is really only collecting about $176 per hour. Compare that to government law, where the average billable hour is $166. They're actually able to bill more because they have efficiencies in state, or maybe they don't need to do as much business development, and they tend to get paid at a higher rate. And so what we see is, while there's this huge difference in hourly rate, in terms of the money they actually take home, there's very little difference, only $20. And so knowing these numbers for your own practice area can help you adjust your business planning, can help you adjust your efficiency planning in order to eliminate kind of these slices being taken out of your income. Now, why are lawyers discounting their rates? Well, we found out that lawyers are discounting their rates mostly for empathy for the client. And that's a noble thing, that you can see their side of the situation. But that doesn't necessarily mean you should be discounting your rights. One of the things that we've seen be very popular with lawyers is payment plans, the ability to spread out payments over time. So rather than reducing the amount paid, reduce the amount that's paid all at once. We've rolled out a new feature for this, and it's been especially popular with family law lawyers, who often told us that the client lacked the ability to pay. So writing down your fees is somewhat controllable. You can still have empathy for the client without necessarily hurting your own bottom line. And that brings us to the client experience. Why are people hiring lawyers? Well, for one thing, lawyers actually help with their sense of well-being. So this chart's very interesting, and this is where we start bringing in client perceptions and lawyer perceptions on the practice of law. And so in green, we have the lawyer's perceptions, and in blue, actual client emotions. And when asked, like, what emotions do you experience when hiring a lawyer? There's a lot of anxiety and confusion, but clients were easily 3 times as likely to say that they felt relief compared to what lawyers think. Hiring you actually brings them a sense of well-being, but it's getting them to the hiring point, which is somewhat difficult. So what's interesting is, for a long time, Clio's looked at the case management aspect, and now we're starting to look at an end-to-end client journey, which focuses on intake as well as referral. And that's why we're going to pull some of the stats that you see in just a second from the legal consumer. When we interviewed 1,300 legal consumers, 59% said they would consider using the law when faced with a legal problem, and 57% have dealt with an issue that could have been handled legally but wasn't. So why aren't they handling things legally? And the top 3 reasons were almost always associated with cost and value. But what was interesting is, once we get down to the bottom, I didn't think I could find a good lawyer. I would know how to use the law. It wouldn't occur to me to seek legal help. A lot of these are actually things that are somewhat overcomable once you start moving away from cost. So what areas were consumers reported to ignore or resolve their problems without the law? It shouldn't be any surprise to any practitioner of law that driving, family, and wills and estates were most likely to try to be handled in a pro se basis. But, I'm sorry, let me jump back. But interestingly, issues related to criminal charges, employment, owning and running a business, or immigration were highly likely to advocate for hiring a lawyer. And so, depending on your practice area, you may need to know what type of client mindset will they have coming into your office and how to overcome that. So when hiring a lawyer, what we found is these 4 things were the most significant reasons for why someone hired a lawyer. I didn't think I could handle it on my own. It was clear the lawyer would be beneficial, and I think this is one of those areas where a good consultation would help you. My issue was serious enough that I felt I needed, or I was able to find a lawyer that I trusted enough to hire. All of these are relationship-based metrics. And what was interesting, when we looked at the opposite, for people who didn't hire a lawyer, what really drove them to avoiding it, we did this kind of impact breakdown. So this is a little bit hard to read, well, a little bit hard to wrap your head around. But on the left-hand side here are the percentage of people who issued a statement, and then on the right-hand side, how impactful it was to them. So people who enjoy handling legal issues without a lawyer, it's going to be really tough to convert them into hiring a lawyer. But while a lot of people said hiring a lawyer is too much trouble, only 7% said that would really stop them from hiring a lawyer, including this one at the bottom, where it seemed like costs were a big issue, but it was really only the driving factor for 6% of the people who reported it. So it's easy for you to overcome costs if you're able to show how beneficial you can be. And you're going to find a lot of people creating opportunities for you to make those conversations. 65% of those who faced a legal problem in the past 2 years hired a lawyer. 58% sought a consult with a lawyer they didn't hire, and 68% communicated with a lawyer they didn't hire. So there are lots of people having conversations with you, and I know from conversations with lawyers, filtering out the good potential clients from the bad is a real burden. But you should know that these conversations aren't necessarily the problems themselves. It's how you approach them. And if we work backwards from successful clients, people who have hired us, people who have paid us, and figured out what makes them likely to recommend us, that may help us find and track down the type of clients that we really want. So 62% of consumers asked a friend or family for recommendations for looking for a lawyer. Your word of mouth is still your best business driver, and you probably are nodding your head right now that most of your clients come in from a recommendation. But what's interesting is most lawyers aren't setting themselves up in such a way that they can track recommendations or solicit them. So do lawyers regularly collect client feedback? The answer is no. For the most part, you don't. 79% either don't regularly collect feedback from clients or collect it in a way where it's not really actionable because it's done casually or informally. And that brings us to what is known in the tech industry as probably the most important question you can ask, which is how likely are you to recommend us to a friend or family on a scale of 0 to 10? And this is what's called the Net Promoter Score question. Whenever asked this, and it's a really simple question, you actually get a neat little number called NPS, where you take the number of people who rate you at 9 or 10, you just add them up, you just count them, and you subtract the number of people who are detractors, who rate you from 0 to 6. 7 and 8 are passive, they could go either way, so you ignore them, and you end up with a number. We actually did this. We asked consumers of legal services to how likely are they to recommend their lawyer. And what we found was lawyers have an NPS of 25. Now, NPS can be both negative and positive. It goes from negative 100 to positive 100. 25 is not bad. It actually puts you in the same category as airlines, banks, wireless carriers. And what I found interesting about this is all of these things are kind of necessities for modern life right now. I need to have a bank account. I need to sometimes travel by plane. I need to have a mobile phone. That doesn't necessarily mean I like the provider. I just need the service. And when we look at other professional services out there, it is possible to have a higher score, like insurance carriers or investment firms. So what's holding legal back from having a higher NPS? So the top ones are actually, the top one is really easy to predict, the overall cost of services. Nobody likes the sticker shock when it comes to legal services. But the next three are very interesting. Ease of understanding the case's expectations, the bedside manner of the lawyer with whom I work, and responsiveness were the next top drivers when it comes to getting a good NPS score for lawyers. So if we know what those are, these are the top four, and cost might be somewhat controllable, but not entirely controllable. How can we rise up to client expectations and move these three issues into positive situations where clients are likely to recommend us? Well, we do that by meeting client expectations. And what was really interesting is we asked 8 different types of interactions between lawyers and clients. And we asked, how would you like to handle this? We asked both lawyers and consumers how they would like to handle these interactions. So for example, when asked, how would you like to go about making an appointment? Lawyers answered in one column and consumers in the other. And we'll go through these quickly so you can see there's some real disparities between the perceptions of consumers and the perceptions of lawyers. So in terms of making appointments, most lawyers believe that they either want to do it in person or via email. And clients are, no, we would much rather do this by phone or some other simpler method. And if you've ever had a back and forth email about when can we meet, you would realize this is a huge pain point the lawyers could solve by just having somebody on the other end of the phone helping the client out. When it came to telling the lawyers the facts and details of the situation, lawyers did not believe they needed to have face-to-face communication, but 70% of consumers did. And so you can see there's this huge gap between what clients are expecting from lawyers and the services that lawyers are providing. And that by shifting your own expectations here, You can actually meet consumer expectations, raise your NPS score, and drive referrals to your business. So learning the legal aspects of the case, lawyers strongly believed in phone and email, clients were the opposite. Getting quick questions answered. I think everybody was somewhat on the same page, except for the fact that clients much preferred phone to other services like email. Getting status updates on a case, everybody was mostly on the same page again, with communications not in person being highlighted. Checking how lawyers spend time on a case. What we see is websites and portals were actually one of the clear winners between both. Signing, viewing, or delivering documents. This one surprised me. I thought for sure that clients would much prefer an online experience when it came to delivering documents, but instead they preferred in person. And making payments. Most lawyers believe that clients want to pay in person. Clients are the opposite. They want to be able to pay online, and you need to find ways to make that possible for them. And so clients are expecting different ways of interacting with you, and they're expecting flexibility as to when they can interact with you. 68% of clients expect lawyers to be available outside of their office. And so these expectations drive certain patterns of behavior within your law firm. And if you're not aware of those expectations and you're missing them, you may be driving clients away from your service. And that includes the vaunted millennial. They're the largest group of purchasers now entering the marketplace in substantial numbers. In fact, they may be buying more legal services now than baby boomers. And so when we took a look at how do they prefer to interact with lawyers, what was interesting is they were also highly likely to focus on in-person interactions, telling the facts of the case, answering quick questions, signing and viewing documents. And our hypothesis is that they're relatively new to purchasing legal services. And so they still need a bit more hand-holding than maybe a person who has gone through a previous divorce or is updating a will rather than making a will. That you may need to have a personal touch with them, even if they're a younger generation. All right, so we've raced through a lot. What are some key lessons you can take away from today? One, change is happening. We know that consumers of legal services are starting to find value outside of the traditional law firm. So, for example, I want you to focus on this gray bar here. These are people who prefer not to hire lawyers. And what they're finding out is virtual lawyers are a good idea. They prefer to never meet in person, and they like the idea of AI and chatbots helping them out. So there's this class of potential clients out there that is looking for delivery of legal services in a new way, and they are actively choosing law firms that support that. Two, that while there is a lot of frustration involved in the legal process, there's a lot of relief that happens from hiring a lawyer. And if you are focusing your consultation upon highlighting that relief and providing that relief, they are more likely to sign with you as a client. So what does that mean? They want to be able to explain their issue in person. They want to understand the legal aspects of their case. They want you to be responsive and convenient, and they want some insight into cost. So not just what your hourly fee is, but what is this going to cost them in total? And collecting that is actually another interesting piece of data available in the Legal Trends Report. We're able to provide the average expected billing amounts per practice area per matter. And so I do recommend you download a copy to see that. But it will tell you, for example, that the average billed amount in an immigration case is $3,000. And being able to provide an average and then discuss the factors that may impact that average gives expected costs and an idea of actual costs to a client without necessarily overwhelming them. And I do think there's some opportunity to evolve the expectations, right? So we talked about signing, viewing, and delivering documents. I actually prefer to send my documents virtually. to my service providers. So maybe it's the signing and getting questions answered that might be where you need to provide office hours, but sharing or delivering documents can be done online. And can you evolve your client expectations around that? So that's a quick and huge overview of Legal Trends Report. I want to thank you for joining us today. I want to encourage you to download a copy where we really explore this information in depth, and you can see for yourself what client expectations are and some suggestions on how to better rise to meet them such that your firm is prepared for 2019.